Oh, hello again. Another week of opportunity, and I stayed up too late last night watching American football, so the Super Bowl was on. For those of you that don't know about that, I'd be surprised if anyone didn't, but it was on, and I watched that until the early hours of the morning, and yeah, got less sleep than usual. So today's been a bit slower, but it's been good nonetheless. I had a couple of started the week with a couple of interesting calls, which is always different. I don't normally do that, in fairness, but I suppose people don't normally book in a call for early Monday, and they did for whatever reason. So a couple of good calls to start the week. Did some exercise, which is always good, and then largely today. So if I look at my win the week, or as I talked about last time, the exercise I'm trying to do now, which has been really interesting, has been mapping out what, if I had a great week, what would that look like, or what are the key things for the week. So as I alluded to last week, really want to refresh and / sharpen my positioning of the business. The second one is pipeline. Well, there's two actually, so I don't know why this is the second one. First one is refresh and sharpen my positioning. 2 is pipeline. And yeah, specific actions under the second one. For example, how many people I want to reach back out to. But yeah, it's going pretty well so far. So I put a good few hours into that. I think it does always hit home to me. If you are not someone that enjoys selling, well, whatever, consulting or selling or whatever it is, you're probably going to struggle running your own business, frankly. And what I mean by that is a huge percentage of your week initially is trying to win new clients. And if you're not into that or struggle with it, or it's not for you, then I think, you're going to be in a tough spot, because it doesn't matter if you have clients that take you to capacity or whatever, you're always going to be looking to bring someone new in the door, or always trying to have these intro calls with brands and companies. So anyway, good start to the week. Win the week is off to a good start, and it was interesting. So this was the first time I had. The other thing I started doing that I mentioned last week was sending myself an email that's scheduled from the previous workday. So it was nice over the weekend to get that, because it just refreshes your mind as to what has happened on Friday. And feeling okay. I would not lie and say it's that impatience creeping in, right? It's like, it's been so interesting for me to do a few of these videos, because it's like the very first video I did, I touched on something that clearly resonated quite a lot with me, and maybe that's part of the reason why I was actually like, okay, doing these videos can be really good for me. But the theme of that video was impatience. I really, I don't know why, I don't know what triggers it, but I came in today, logged on, I just kind of got a little bit of an impatient surge. Maybe it's the tiredness, I don't know. But yeah, and I had a couple of those intro calls this morning, and they're not going to go anywhere, and that's fine. But maybe it just adds on a layer of impatience, in the sense of, it would be lovely to get a new client, or it would be lovely to have an existing client maybe look to do more or whatever. So, but again, I don't think there's anything I need to do differently today, or would have done differently today, that would have changed that. I think it just comes and goes, that layer of, you want it now, so to speak. Maybe there's a deeper underlying reason for that in myself, but yeah, that's how I'm feeling. I feel pretty good overall. Pretty good to me means I know I'm doing the right things. I've got a good week mapped out. I'm clear on what the key things are, and there's a few smaller things I'm going to be chipping away at on the side when I get a chance. But overall, going to London on Thursday is probably the other main event. I've got a couple of online client sessions tomorrow. So yeah, the week's going to fly by, truthfully. It's just one of those ones I know it's going to be Friday before I know it. So I was excited today to get stuck into some work. The thought I had that I wanted to share was off the back of, so last night, watching the Super Bowl, rewatching some of the highlights today when I was on a break, what stood out to me was how, and I think the parallel of what I'm doing was the winners, the Kansas City Chiefs. They've won it a few times now. The quarterback has been in that Super Bowl clutch moment scenario now at least a couple of times, 3-4 times, whatever it is. He was so calm and cool and collected and frankly executed in a very stressful scenario to a very high level. There's a podcast, High Performance, I think it's big in the US and the UK now as well, but it's been around a while. I don't really listen to it too much anymore, but what I always liked about it was hearing the versions of what they asked the question, what does high performance mean to athletes and business people and whatnot. And the variety of answers is quite interesting. Or at least the episodes I listened to, the variety of answers was quite interesting. But that last night to me is high performance. It's like, can you do the thing that you are exceptional at when you're put into a really stressful situation? That is high performance to me. So in the case of last night, I mean, frankly, it is just sport. And I say just sport, I love sport. I'm a huge sport fan. I love looking at the parallels between sport and business. I say just lightly, but at the end of the day, it is entertainment. Like that's it. That's why it's there. I mean, sport, that happened last night and it was fantastic and it was brilliant. That was entertainment. That's why it's there. It's not there for any bigger reason. Maybe it is in your eyes. Again, I just see it as entertainment. It's obviously become a professional sport or a professional thing as much as a job is. So the athletes will quite often talk about how it's their job. It's a pretty privileged job to have, frankly. With if you lose the Super Bowl, it's tough to come back from in some ways, mentally maybe. But at the end of the day, it's just sport. And if you compare it to something like being a surgeon or a lawyer or whatever else, the magnitude of what's involved is significantly less meaningful. So, yeah, to bring it back to my point, high performance is what I'm touching on. And when I looked at how that quarterback went about his business last night and the team overall, you could just sense that they'd been in this exact same scenario, albeit against a different team in a different day a year or two ago or whatever it was. But you could see that they just were so comfortable, or at least it felt more like a training drill, or it felt like or looked like something not only had they been in real time before, but they'd also practiced for countless times. And that's one of the things that stand out to me from, I've mentioned it to quite a few people now recently, but I was at a conference a while back, and one of the things that came up was how sport teams and businesses are so similar, but what stands out from the great sports teams that most businesses don't do, one of the things was practice. So practice, basically. I think it was even in a post-game interview with the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, he said, he was almost sick of hearing the coaching staff must have went through like rules and certain things that could happen in all these different scenarios, and one of them was going to overtime because the match was tied. And it sounds like the quarterback, who's obviously really good at what he does, he was just sick of going through this stuff so often, but he respects that, as a consequence of doing that, he stood up last night and did what he had to do. So it was quite remarkable to watch. But again, to bring this to a point of like where I'm at with things, when I speak to people, agency owners, my level of high performance, or what I expect from myself to help them, is to put myself in their shoes, knowing what I know, knowing what I've felt in stressful scenarios, and then ultimately helping them plot a path to executing on or improving X or doing Y to a really high standard, to the best of my ability, based on what I've seen and what I know, what I've felt and what I've experienced. sometimes I think you just have to feel things to understand how important they might be, or understand the consequences. So for example, I'll just use it. If you've never gone through a redundancy process, and you've never gone through the process of letting someone go, or if you've never been through the process of being let go by a company, you've no idea what it feels like. You, in theory, might know the process. You can, and I speak to this bit from doing it. I mean, I've done it. I've let people go in a business. It's not pleasant at all. You could have the perfect plan in terms of how well you can let someone go, in terms of doing it in a fair, empathetic way. It can be for, on paper, the right reasons, business reasons. That does not make it any easier for either yourself or the person on the receiving end of that redundancy. And until you do it, you've no idea what it actually feels like. And then when you've done it, I think you have a greater appreciation for the consequences of the actions you took that maybe landed you in that scenario. So just throwing it out there are a lot of businesses that have overhired or hired poorly, in my opinion, in the last 5 years. And as a consequence, tie in a few other things that are maybe outside of your control, you end up in this scenario where you may have to let people go. And there'll always be people that say, look, this is like anything, it's a cycle almost, it happens every 5 to 10 years, it lines up economic downturns and recessions. And I'd say, okay, again, there are times that there are things out of your control. But to me, in that scenario, it's an example of where letting go of someone in your company is just one small scenario that you have to do to a very high standard, or you have to execute on that very well. We've seen plenty of examples where companies have done it really poorly. I'm not saying the way I did it was perfect by any means, but we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that the way we were going to do it was with the employee in mind as much as possible. And from my perspective, that is a scenario then, even though I had gone through it countless times, I'd practiced the process with myself, in a mirror, with the person helping me with the process, when it came down to the stressful scenario of actually doing it, it probably went about as well as it could have, but it was still really tough. Reflect that, or mirror that to last night's event. There you have an athlete who's arguably the best in the world at what he does, in a really the best in the world at what he does, in the most stressful scenario you could probably put him in at what he does, and he did it very well. So to me, that is high performance. To me, the parallel there is in, I am trying to help people in my version of that, which is stressful scenarios you might face running a company such as an agency, almost getting ahead of things, or helping people see what's coming up for them, or what they might be experiencing, or what we can do today to decrease the chances of facing more stressful scenarios in the future, etc. So yeah, that's an interesting thought I had today. When I was reflecting on it, when I was watching the highlights today, I just felt like there was a lot of overlap. And by all means, again, there are plenty of people, and I think this is something, there's something to be said here. If you were an expert with 40 years experience in something, by all means, you have seen a lot more than someone that has done something for 5 years. But the way in which you deliver, or explain, or apply that expertise to certain scenarios with certain people might mean that you're not as good a fit to help certain people as the person with less experience is. So for example, as I regularly say, I've no doubt there are advisors out there or consultants out there doing something similar to what I do. Brilliant. I'm glad there are. But they will do it in their way, I will do it in my way. Ultimately, I just hope for everyone's sake that whoever you're working with or whatever you're doing, we find a way to do it to a really high standard, so that more businesses do really well. More businesses do really well. I think it's only good for all of us, truthfully. But that's just a broader view on things. And anyhow, so a couple of themes there. High performance, how sport overlaps with business, specifically last night, and how impressive it was how someone could handle a stressful scenario and still perform to a really high standard. And I suppose I managed to throw in a bit of a business update at the start as well. So week's off to a good start, lots of thoughts spinning around my head. I just need to get back and keep working on the pipeline. Again, 2 key things this week: pipeline and positioning. And positioning will largely be Wednesday and Friday. Pipeline will largely be today and tomorrow, with a bit when I'm traveling as well. So I think that's it. Yeah, it's good. I will wrap things up soon and be back tomorrow probably to talk a bit more specifically about pipeline stuff, but we'll see.